It's good afternoon. It is wonderful to see you all on this cold day on the advent of perhaps real winter in Rhode Island. I want to welcome you to the first of the Spirit Acting Multifaith Views on Social Change and Social Action 2012 Speaker Series. I'm the Reverend Nancy Sokup, and I'm the new University Multifaith Chaplain, so I'm very happy that we're initiating this program, which will have probably 4 other talks, and we'll make sure you learn more about those as the semester goes on. The series was the idea of the Interfaith Council, which is a group of faith initiatives here on campus, and it includes student leaders and faith groups from Hillel, InterVarsity, the Muslim Students Association, and the Newman Club. So this is their event. This was their idea to do this, and I'm so thrilled. Before I go any further, I want to just thank some people, some of whom are here. This is actually a joint effort of the Roger Williams Interfaith Council, as I said, the Spiritual Life Office, and the Intercultural Center. But we're very thankful to a number of funders and co-sponsors, and particularly we're thankful for the mini grant that we received to do this series for the President's Inclusive Excellence Initiative. Furthermore, we thank Associate Provost and Dean Robert Cole for support from the College of Arts and Sciences, and Dean David Logan from the School of Law, as well as Casey Ferreira, who is the director of the Feinstein Center for Service Learning and Community Engagement. So we're so grateful for this support, and we look forward to hearing Teny today as well as others through the semester. Now, I just have to quickly give a couple other thanks. The staff of the IC has helped make this possible, the Intercultural Center, Maria Atkins and Maria Prezioso, Alicia Haley, and the many student workers who inhabit the IC. But most especially, we want to thank Dr. Andy Diaz, Director of the Intercultural Center, who has really continued to cheer us on as we move toward this idea into realization through the spring. Also, Dean Kathleen McMahon, Dean of Students, thank you. You have cheered us on and listened to me as I find my way through the university and given enormous support. But most important, we also thank Vice President John King, who is here today to make some remarks about spiritual life on campus. Here is the public service announcement. Some of you are here because this is a merit point system. This is thrilling. I'm so glad you're here. As you know, in order to get points, accrual points toward 2012-2013, you must sign this handy-dandy list, print your name and your student ID number. I'm going to pass it around. Make sure before you leave that you signed it. We want you to get the points. Okay. May I introduce Vice President of Student Life, John King.
Good evening. As Nancy was saying my name, I was powering down my cell phone. It's just a habit that I get into, so I urge you to do the same so that when Terry is speaking in a little bit, the most important part of today, that he's not interrupted by text message bells or cell phone special calling rings. It's really a privilege to be here, and I appreciate Nancy inviting me to share a few remarks. About a year ago, I started needing to use reading classes, and I don't have them with me. So if I say anything that's a little bit offbeat, just attribute to the fact that I can't see what I'm reading. But I'll do my best. The university strives through numerous programs and centers on campus, and especially the Intercultural Center, to give full expression to diverse identities and the views emanating from these identities. As we continue to broaden and deepen the goals of diversity with the goals of the academy, religious identity needs to be a strong component of this process. Now, we are not a religious institution. We are a secular institution. But we are not a business school either, although we have a school of business here. We're not an engineering school. We have a school of engineering. We have lots of students, faculty, and staff members on this campus for whom spirituality is a very, very strong foundation of their life. So just because we're a secular institution doesn't mean that we shouldn't value the spiritual life of students. And research indicates, Alexander Aston through UCLA, that spirituality is actually very important to college students. That during the college years, students are looking for a confirmation of how they view life, the meaning of life, where they seek support, where they seek moral guidance, where they determine how it is they think about themselves and they think about others and how to treat others and the dignity of the full human person. For this semester, I'm delighted that the Interfaith Council, working with the Spiritual Life Office, and let's be honest, at a university our size, when we say center or we say Spiritual Life Office, we're not talking about a lot of people. As I was saying, when we talk about a Spiritual Life Office, when we talk about a center, it's really not a lot of people. It's usually operating on the backs of one or two people and some student leaders. And we call it a center because it's important thought. There are important concepts being tackled in the centers and in these small offices. So Spiritual Life is sponsoring a 5-part speaker series. And we've never had anything like this for Spiritual Life at this institution. They will open discourse on the role of religion in the public. The name Spirit Acting Multifaith Views on Change and Social Action will feature individuals from varying religious, faith, ethical perspectives who are leading social change in Rhode Island. In addition to discussing their justice work in Rhode Island cities, towns, and villages, each speaker will be asked to integrate into their talk a primary question. How have their spiritual, faith, religious, or ethical beliefs influenced how, why, and where they act for the greater good in the world? In this process, the Council hopes that those in attendance, especially students, might consider the same process for themselves and in concert with those of faith or belief systems other than their own. The Council also envisions this series as a way to encourage awareness about religious identity as an integral part and component of Roger Williams University diversity. How are we going to get this done? How are we going to raise the level of discourse about spiritual life in the Interfaith Council on campus? 3 ways. Interfaith cohesion. One purpose of the program is to have students of varying faiths work together to enhance dialogue around religious diversity at Roger Williams. Enhancing dialogue at Roger Williams University. The theme of each series will certainly enrich the place of religious identity on campus and will reveal, we hope, that social change, social action, and social justice are common concerns among the faith communities that are represented here in the student body and the faculty and staff of Roger Williams. How do we raise the profile of religious and ethical discourse at Roger Williams? The Council hopes that through this series, the profile will be raised. One talk can start to do this, but does not have to have the sustained institutional memory that a series might have. So in other words, tonight we start a tradition. Tonight we start a series, which is always a wonderful thing in the life of the university. I want to take a moment to recognize that none of this would be possible without having a very dedicated and talented university multi-faith chaplain, Nancy Suka. And I have to compliment Dean Diaz and Dean McMahon and others on the search committee for recruiting and bringing to campus such a wonderful, caring, and passionate person. If you don't know Nancy, get to know her. We hope that you are here with us for a while, and that tonight is the first of many successful programs offered by Spiritual Life. Thank you very much.
It's really overwhelming, but I have to say, the spark to keep Spiritual Life alive here at Roger Williams comes with John King and Kathleen McMahon and Andy Diaz. So, as well as our faculty advisor, and I'm thrilled that Madge Toms is here, who's the faculty advisor for the Newey Club. Friends, I have the great pleasure to introduce to you Teny Gross. Teny is familiar to the university. He has often come to speak to classes at the School for Justice Studies. But today we're going to ask Teny to speak about his work from a different perspective. And the title of this talk says it all. How did a Jewish, Catholic, Greek Orthodox, Israeli-Serb end up working for nonviolence among Americans' gang youth? Thank you, Teny, for that amazing title. It has provoked already a lot of thought. Teny, as you know, is the executive director of the Institute for Study and Practice of Nonviolence here in Rhode Island. Its purpose is to teach the principles and practices of nonviolence locally, nationally, and internationally. Teny believes that if you begin to untether violence locally, it will have a ripple effect. The work that the Institute does, and I'll tell you, Teny will never say, I did it. He always talks about the Institute, so tonight our challenge is to get him to talk a little bit about his story. But they have won awards locally and nationally. They've been recognized as the U.S. Conference of Mayors selected them as an institute's work as best practice in combating gang violence, as well as Teny 2 years ago being named to the Martin Luther King Hall of Fame by then Providence Mayor David Cicilline. But Teny's story comes out of the confluence of his own personal identities. Teny knows violence. He is tethered to the legacy of the Holocaust, and growing up in Israel, he experienced violence and conflict firsthand. He came to the United States and received a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Tufts University. This guy is so eclectic, a film major, I believe that's right. And he also received a Master's of Theological Studies in Ethics from Harvard Divinity. Teny's life and work is, as the title of the talk, In Pursuit of Peace on America's Street. His path is this, and we're so fortunate that he's going to come and share how he got to that place.
So one promise I will make is you have 4 more speakers in this series. It's just going to get better. All right, so keep coming back. Can you hear me? Great. So I only have 3 hours tonight, so I'm going to really try and rush through things. And I'll try and cover a few things. Some are very practical. So some of the links, but don't worry, it's not 3 hours, it's a joke.
I'd be happy.
I'm behind you.
I couldn't get you out of the... I almost had us late because we were having so much fun talking.
Right. So some of the links to Roger Williams. We worked with Dean Logan and the law faculty, and Jorge Loza, one of the professors here, is my team captain. We run in Roger Williams Park in the Latino Policy Institute. So my first CVS run downtown this past year was with the Latino Policy Institute. Done thing with the Justice Program, as well as the Advanced Teaching Police Department grant. So we've been here frequently, and I'm always impressed. This is the university furthest from the city, and that you have been more innovative in many ways. And the latest one, which is really, really special for us, we have 2 ex-offenders at the Institute. I mean, half of our staff are ex-offenders, who are seriously involved in gang life, etc., who are actually students. And we're going to get degrees from Roger Williams University through College Unbound. And we're now recruiting maybe a whole cohort. So you're in a real meaningful way providing an opportunity, because one of the things we have said at the Institute, if people are going to get a job through us, so some of them really start almost unemployable, and no one would want them. We have 4 people on staff who were involved in homicides. If they're not through the process of being employed at the Institute, exposed to it, if they're not improving their education standing in life, they will forever be dependent on being employed at the Institute, or having as in other programs around the country, falling back to the old life, which they're very afraid is just staring at them. Can I really leave the past? So these opportunities through College Unbound is just a wonderful gift. And thank you for being flexible-minded, working with College Unbound, and in a new way of teaching. And to see A.J. Bentham, who Stephen Maloranian knows, who started as, he had a choice. Is he going back to jail? 2 of his friends were killed in a very short period of time. He was 23. We recruited him 8 years ago to start as a street worker. Eventually ended up as a senior street worker. Now he runs a street worker program. This guy, I never seen him with a book. The fact that now he calls me, Teny, I think there was a shooting at Chad Brown, and where are you calling me from? It's 11:30. I'm at the library at Providence College doing homework, right? The fact that he loves the reading, loves the book, the education, this is really a wonderful kind of partnership. So I wanted to recognize that and encourage you to support it and actually make you aware that this is something the university is doing and is so important. Yesterday I got a call for a mediation center here at Faculty. We're trying to look for someone to help someone trying to get visitation while they're incarcerated. So the university is involved through your pro bono collaborative and others. And now we have a very good friend here who's in charge of public safety, Stephen Maloranian. Welcome him. He's a wonderful person. You're very, very lucky to have him here. It's a loss for us in Providence, a loss for the Institute, but he'll continue and build, and I think you're very fortunate to have someone in his caliber, and his wife is another gem. Don't steal her now from Butler Hospital, another gem. So I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit, as Nancy was saying. It's not like I don't speak about myself. I'm not that modest. I always do weave some biography stuff. I'm trying to really focus on some of the faith and the steps that actually led to this work. So let me give you a little bit of background on what the Institute does, though. There's articles here for those of you who are gluttons for punishment and want to read further. So the Institute really tries to deal with violence, very practically. Eric Holder, the U.S. Attorney, the United States Attorney, visited us from Washington last summer, which is like getting the Oscar in our field. And what he said is, when he left, is nonviolence, like in many people's mind, is black and white reels of trying to integrate lunch counters. And he actually now saw an embodiment in today's issue. Today's issue is not it's not a difficulty of allowing a black kid coming into a swimming pool that they were excluded before. In reality now, racism has changed to the point, and it's not just racism, it's other forces, that young black kids actually are the most danger to themselves, as well as Latino and Asian and white. We kill within groups. And the homicide rates, if anyone wants to guess, the last 10 years in the United States we lost 200,000 people to homicide. In the wealthiest country on the planet, 200,000 people. And if you're wondering what's the cost of a homicide, 240 homicides, a minuscule number, showing up to the scene, investigation, hospital, burial, trial, jail, loss of income. So just 240 homicides costs $2 billion. So this is also the system we have at the moment of failure. Not only is it close to immoral, it's also, if you're purely a financial conservative or just a caring taxpayer, it is really a waste of our resources, and it eats away of our investment in R&D and future of our society. Right, so this failure that we have now, and that we lost so many of our people, costing us actually, potentially can cost our future. And that's probably another talk, the talks that I usually do, why financially the existence that we have now and the systems that we have now are actually jeopardizing our future as a democracy. So I often get asked, how did I get to do, usually when I speak in Rhode Island, I say, do I sound like a Rhode Islander? Not the case. How did I end up doing this? And I said that life is, I said it also to young people. I was talking today in Superior Court. I was helping a former gang leader, sort of in a small case, and he brought with him his young brother, who is 22 and feels life is ended because he wasted 2 years. And I explained to him that until 28, I had no real clue what I'm going to do. So often we talk about that, and life is, if you allow it, is a series of accidents. I did not plan to do what I do today, by a long shot. Didn't even know the street work, the idea of street work ever existed. So I grew up in Israel, I was a bit of a minority. Now it's more common in Israel that you have Christians within the Jewish population. The Arab population was different. But I had a Greek Orthodox, my mother was a mix too. We sort of think Christians and Jews, wow, that's a big deal. Let me tell you, my mother's mother was a Catholic aristocrat from Vienna, and she married a Greek Orthodox Serb. Now, today that doesn't make a big impression. That is actually the division of Europe, and why World War I started, right? There was a Serb who killed Franz Ferdinand, who was the crown prince of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It was seen like the end of civilization. Serbs were in the 500 years of Turkish occupation, and the Austrians were considered to save Europe from the Muslims. So those are very divided people. Greek Orthodox Serbs and Catholic Austrians, these are not fans. When they got married, all was nice and well. World War II started, and suddenly you have this gorgeous blonde woman in the middle of all these Serbs. And you know, the Germans, if you ask the Germans where did they get the toughest time from, was from the Serbs. Right? The Serbs absolutely tortured them in the guerrilla warfare. And what the Nazis did in return would literally hang like the men of the village in the public square. This was a very brutal conflict, local conflict. So suddenly you have this blonde woman, Austrian, who speaks German. Her husband is actually in jail. No one to fend for. So that's conflict number one. I speak Serbo-Croatian really badly by now. But, so in Israel, for example, we celebrated Christmas in hiding. We had a little tree at home, and it was on the second floor where my parents' bedroom was, because in Israel it just didn't show it. And I remember the excitement of my parents when they were watching it from Bethlehem, right, just on TV, Christmas. But my mother was not a big fan of Christians. For those who were starting to get enlightened, she really blamed religion for wars. Right? So my mother was pretty anti-religious. It gets even more complicated than that. My Jewish Croatian father, his grandparents got married in a little village called Auschwitz, which became famous 40, 50 years later. I just came back from a week meditating in Auschwitz with Zen peacemakers, Buddhists, 100 peacemakers from around the world. Turns out Auschwitz was selected because it actually was a very busy train exchange from all of Europe, and it was really a logistical decision why to build Auschwitz there. So this Jewish kid in Zagreb, right, which is the capital of Croatia, his family, as the Nazis kind of occupy, and the Croatian Catholics, immediately a big amount of them revert to supporting the Nazis within one day. His older sister was in high school, very popular girl. The next day, I saw her interviews for the Spielberg project, which documents survivors of the Holocaust. The next day, in high school, as they're all in the kind of the playground, I mean, high school is only a playground, you know, out of class, suddenly no teacher and no student would talk to her. And then it sounds more painful, almost. I mean, it sounds outrageous to say, and I don't mean it that way. Like almost more disappointing than actually being shot by a Nazi is the fact that the people you grew up with, because now you're from the out group, just no one will talk to you. The day before they were your lifelong friend. That betrayal, people don't. She's now 87. You don't recover. Some people do not recover from that betrayal. But to trust in human nature again, when everyone you knew turned on you. My father was taken by his mother from Zagreb, the big city, which was under occupation and collaboration. The Croatians, Catholics were willing. They had their own government, like the French had Vichy, that was collaborating. So his mother took him on a train to the coast, to the Adriatic coast, and put him in a Catholic monastery. She paid money. And the week that he died, he was still shedding a tear that his mom on the train did not turn back to look at him when he was 14 and she left him there. And he thought it's because she was probably crying, because she knew she'll never make it And indeed, she was either killed in Auschwitz or on the train by Croatia taking her to Auschwitz. So she was killed during the Holocaust. But all these disaster stories have funny sides to them, right? And so he's in a monastery. Well, the SS needs some office space, right? Good bureaucrats always need more office space, and the SS were excellent bureaucrats. So they take half the monastery. And what, even the Nazis need some time to rest, so they like to watch German movies. For my dad, that was a great gift. It's the Jews who knew how to speak German, right? So at home they spoke German. So he gets to see films in the language that was spoken at home. At some point, the monks says, look, Sasha, you cannot hang with the Nazis, with the officers watching German movies. At some point, they're going to figure out that the only kid in the monastery who understands German is probably a Jew, right? So he gets sent back. When it gets too dangerous, he gets sent back to a monastery in Zagreb, the capital city. And that's a story he told me. I don't know if it's true or not, but it's so good that I do want to say it. It was a bit, he wanted to be a Catholic priest, right? I mean, he's in the monastery. We're much more a product of our environment, by the way, than we think we are. DNA is overrated, and our individual independence is way overrated, right? How many of us really choose our religion? And it happens more in a free society like that when we interact with each other, but most of us, it's not like this is the truth. We get born into cultures and we go with that. And there's beauty in every one of those faiths. That's what I discovered through being with so many faiths. But I hope that I'm not offending anyone who's overgeneralizing. That's kind of a fly-by-night kind of comment. But apparently on Christmas night, and this is an 800-year-old monastery, he asked for the monastery keys, right? With something you can imagine as big as that, because he was going out Christmas night. Right? He was by then 17 or so. And he said that was really the camel that broke, they said, you're done with staying in the monastery. This is during World War II. It sounds unrealistic that it's true, but that's a story my dad told me. So there's funny parts to war, and there always are. And I'll tell you a few more funny ones. I'm not trying to make light of really bad situations, but also it's what keeps us sane. Because I'm a pretty heavy guy. I definitely have a lot of Eastern European DNA. I don't believe in just be happy and just think positively. Life doesn't work like that. And humor actually comes usually in small dosages, but you really respect it if you face life really. Because it's like those little nuggets. If you ate chocolate breakfast, lunch, and dinner, it would be pretty disgusting. You wouldn't like it. But if you get it occasionally, it really is a special dessert. So moving forward, that's my background. My dad left in '49 after the Holocaust, went to Israel, not because he loved the Jews, not because he wanted to build a new nation, but because his sister mates fled out of Yugoslavia and ended up there, and his parents were dead, and that was the only place to go. My mother went to Israel 3 years later, also not because she was a Zionist or thought the Jews were such great victims that let me join their ranks. But practically, she met him for a week, and this was a chance to get out of communism. By then, Yugoslavia became communist. And he said to her, they married through the mail, she converted in Zagreb to conservative Judaism. I said, if it doesn't work, just continue to Canada. Right? She came to Israel. It was never recognized that she was a Jew because it wasn't an Orthodox conversion. So they stayed together. Maybe somehow she regretted not going to Canada, but maybe that's what I'm making up with being here now. But she was an interesting breed. She was a tough Serb in many levels, really tough and really anti-religious. And the second, she didn't want an Israeli to be such a chauvinist that only thinks the Jews are victims and only cares about Israel. But also, so she was pretty tough on the Palestinians and really had a point of view that the world is coming to get you. And be tough and never be weak again. And at the same time, don't be chauvinist and proud. So she had contradictions in her. And I think one of the things I kind of titled this is cosmopolitanism versus patriotism or narrowness. I am made of such a mix. I'm not confused about being an Israeli. I'm comfortable with my identity. And that means also embraces all the very negative things that my nation is doing. And I, as a soldier, was part of it. I'm not denying that America is not a perfect land. But knowing who you are, living with the imperfection, not hiding in and just having this dumb patriotism, but at the same time being critical, but doesn't mean you have to just reject your culture either. So fast forward, we had a very wise principal in elementary school that made an exchange program between us and Palestinian villages. We thought Israel is all just. When I grew up, we were very, very grown up. We had the Kool-Aid. We actually had the theory of purity of arms, believe it or not. That we do not shoot people that we capture. That has since then proven really wrong. We're not really practicing it. That we always seek peace. Our enemies are the ones who do not, that have not sought it. So we grew up under kind of normal, understandable propaganda when you're under a lot of conflict. Since then, Israel has become a lot more complex. The Israelis now has some levels as or more vigorous debates than America has. 40% of Israelis are actually secular, right? And so it's an interesting place. And actually, I love the intensity of the country. We read a lot. Every hour you hear the news. You actually walk on the street and you hear beep, 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 and it's the 3 o'clock, the 4 o'clock, the 5 o'clock news. The debates are very vigorous. We also almost suffer like now with Republicans and Democrats in Washington, kind of paralysis of so many voices. But it's a very lively democracy. So we did those exchanges as school children. It wasn't a practice, and it wasn't like there was no curriculum of multiculturalism or any of that. It was one principle who thought it was important. I lived in a film studio, so already was exposed to outsiders. And the guards, the people who were guarding the studio were Palestinians, because they worked for less. Sort of like here we have immigrants working in restaurants, etc., etc. They were the guards. It was bad salaries, and when my parents went abroad for a week or two, they would trust the Palestinians to kind of take care of me. And eventually I ended up in Qalqilia, which there's never, I would not be able to do now, which is in the West Bank. And Tybeh, which is on the Israeli side, the Arab village. So I ended up spending overnights there. Doesn't mean I didn't get the other conservative side, it just was, this was building a little bit of reminding me that the other side is human, and that's very, very important. I'll jump forward 20-something years when I was at Tufts University, and I was working as a street worker in the most violent part of Boston, where we had 152 homicides. That I sometimes felt there were some students in Tufts who were driving Range Rover to class, and they really thought that the experience of America I'm talking about was like another planet, that they resented it, and they didn't want to talk about it. And it was a really alienating experience for me, on parts of Tufts that was they're not recognizing what I now call the other America. We have two Americas. Where is in America where if you're born in certain places, your chances of making it, we know now Fox News calls Denmark a socialist country. There's more social mobility in Denmark than the United States at the moment, and that's just a fact. So in Israel, we also, between Palestinian and Israeli, definitely there's a break. There's wars between us. It's kind of like gang warfare. I ended up going to the army. So I spent time in the West Bank, and we traveled, and we knew Palestinians before, but then the army changed, and I was really surprised the Palestinians were not rebelling against us. And this myth of the Israeli army being this amazing army, and it's a good army. But I was very surprised that they didn't just go through our camps and blow us up. Because as now someone became, before you joined the army, I was like, every statement, bad statement I ever thought I ever had about a teacher, I thought the army knows about it. I was over-mythologizing the ability of the army to know intelligence. Now you join the army, you see that we are as idiotic as everyone else around the world. We have bright people and we have idiots. And I was like, why are they not coming through the gates and just blowing us up? We're so lax, we're laughable. Sure enough, 3 months after I leave the army to London in '87, December, the first Intifada breaks out. The Palestinians do exactly that. I end up in London for 2 years and I live in an Irish neighborhood. I live with a very educated family. That father was a Holocaust survivor from Austria, a Jew, went to Oxford. One of the physicists that Einstein got out to Cambridge ended up working in the Alamo project, developing the nuclear bomb. He then rejected violence like Einstein and went kind of into exile in London, and he would quote the Iliad in Greek. So this was a very smart group of people I was around. The way they spoke about the Irish was stunning. There was a consensus in London the Irish are stupid. There were jokes about them in parties in the open. And I started to recognize a pattern here, right? Israelis, Palestinians, European Jews, African and Arab Jews. When two groups meet, one puts the other one, that's again an unprofessional sociology. You're getting really bad kind of home cooking sociology. But it was a common, you could make those jokes in the open in London about the Irish. So I like to put sometimes my stupid foreigner hat on, and I said, because I was with people, we went to see the National Theatre all the time. And I knew what what do the English were valued the most? I knew I was going to go after that. I said, the last 200 years, playwrights, poets, writers, and they're like, that's a contradiction, right? The English value words more than anything else. The Irish dominate completely. So that was a contradiction right there. I have an aunt, Catholic side of the family, who's in Italian, lives in Vicenza, northern Italy, spent time there. They would give southern Italy tomorrow to Algeria if they could. They look at them as a losing region, lazy regions to, again, north and south, same thing, dark and light. Right? Ended up in the United States. My sister's husband worked at Children's Hospital, said, why don't you come and study here? She was a former high-ranking officer in the Israeli Air Force, worked with Yoni Netanyahu on Entebbe, Special Ops, the first woman non-pilot commander of an Israeli Air Force base. It was unheard of, facing Syria and Lebanon. So really was like this superstar in the Air Force. Ended up as a housewife in Boston, so allowing her husband now to take over his career as a medical person. I ended up in Boston. And I said, hey, I was a Spartan. I came from Israel. I'm going to be an Athenian now. I'm going to just study. Not getting involved. This is not my conflict. I survived. I survived the Middle East. I survived my Serbian Croatian background. I survived the Irish and the English. I'm coming here to study. Well, pretty much in '89 when I came, a case happened that was every day on the news. Child Stewart case. Outside of a Harvard hospital, Bridgerman Women's, a pregnant woman was shot. Eventually she died and her unborn child was died. And a guy faked, husband, Child Stewart, faked a call that he was just shot by a black man, that she was just shot by a black man. And every night we saw pictures in Mission Hill, not far. I went to the museum school on Huntington Avenue and Tufts. It's also one of those combined degrees. And every night the pictures were where I was. People in Mission Hill, African American males, was called hands down being searched. A black man got charged for the murder. But as they were going through the court cases, the case was starting to fall apart, and as they were closing on Child Stewart, he drove off a bridge. That created a crisis. Another great lesson to me in life is crises are opportunities. They really are. They force you to think differently. They force an opening. They're not always good, and sometimes opportunities is missed, maybe often. But in this case, I was connected by a speechwriter to Mayor Flynn, who was a friend from college, to this unknown minister, African-American Pentecostal minister. His name was Reverend Rivers. He was unknown. He still doesn't have a license, 20-something years later. He was reading at the time Marcus Garvey, the idea of kind of African-American independence. And he was fascinated to walk around Dorchester, as much as we were having 2 homicides a week, 2 or 3 homicides a week. and talk about how there's another group that is not very popular, not always portrayed as pretty, the Jews, who didn't run anything for 2,000 years. How come now you're independent and you run your own affair? It was very fascinating. So that was my ticket, and I had a camera hanging on me. That was my excuse. I'm a documentary student now. And we didn't promise each other nothing, and we would walk everywhere and talk and talk and talk. My teachers were pretty upset. Teny, you're not bringing any photographs. I said, look, this is a total different world to me. I'm just listening. I would sit at night like a fly on the wall when the original gang of Boston, Corbett Street, would sit with Reverend Rivers and a few of his parishioners in a small apartment on the second floor, 53 School Street, and talk in a way that, A, I didn't understand 60% of what was being said. I was fascinated by the stories. I didn't understand. When I would go home, I was like, Reverend Rivers, what do I need to read? What do I need to... So I was getting sucked into something that I had no intention of at all getting involved. I was working at the time also at one of the wealthiest malls in America in Chestnut Hill, the Ralph Lauren section. And there was another lesson I learned about America. And that was, one day someone comes in, grabs 10 coats, leather coats, and runs out. What does an Israeli former soldier do? Chase them. Chase. Right? I run out, there's a cop there, a Boston cop. I said, Boston or Chestnut Hill, I don't know. There's a cop in uniform. They're over there, they're over there. They're fleeing in a car. And he like does, where? He's clearly not interested in chasing them. I get pretty frustrated. I come back in. The head of my department sits me down. Rhonda, I remember. Says, Teny, don't ever do this again. The last thing Filene's need is you suing the company. This is all insured. This all passes to the consumer. I said, but why is the cop? I come from a culture that cares, right? Why is the cop didn't catch him? It's wrong. He's 2 years from retirement. He ain't gonna get shot. It doesn't end there. I mean, the lessons you can learn in a mall about a society are great. That night I ended up with a major drug dealer in Four Corners, who by then became a friend, who the Reverend introduced me. And he would challenge the church and taught us great lessons why the church fails and the drug dealers succeed. Sal Brown, Selvin Brown, who was the king of Four Corners, AK-47, a Kawasaki motorcycle. He also had my merchandise. So he had like 30 Guess jeans. He loved silk shirts. He had black Adidas, 20 black Adidas, all in a row. Because in Four Corners you got beaten if you showed up with Nike. And he was laughing when I was telling him my caring story, how I was trying to stop this. And he had this big kind of island laughter. His family came from the island. And he was like, Teny, see, I never need to leave the neighborhood. It all comes to me. It's bartering. He would take me to crack houses. I actually photographed in crack houses where people would take his measurements. Right? And I realized there was a system that was insured. It really I cannot say it in the time that I have here today, but we have a system, the violence that happens, the numbers that I talk about, 200,000 number, we can change that. This is a very wealthy, powerful country. We do not have the will. We have built the system through courts and insurance and other ways that perpetuates what is happening. So when someone wants to run, someone has decided this is not good for you to run. We don't want you to sue us. We'd rather. And I said to Sal, and I said to Sal, but what happens? This guy gets arrested. Let's say he's addicted. He's the one who got you the club. He was laughing. He said that night he will be relieved the next day because he needs his fix. They're not going to keep him. So I worked for 10 years with a Pentecostal church, what became eventually the Temple Coalition of Churches. As a secular guy, right, as an Israeli. The other ones were AME, African Methodist Church, and Baptist Church, Reverend Brown, Hammond, and Rivers, close friends of mine. And for a while, faith-based was really, really making a difference in Boston. But then the egos of the churches, they fought between themselves. That's a whole other interesting story about faith. And it fell apart, and I was actually asked to write an editorial in the Globe, why Boston is failing. So we brought violence down in Boston from 152 to 31. 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 152 but then human nature. And they're actually a secular story, tells the story of Icarus, the Greeks. We were going to the sun, and eventually our wings got melted, and we fell down, right? At that time, I'm working as a street worker in Boston. I also volunteered at the campus school on the Middle East process. And I took 6 months to go and videotape after finishing my undergrad in the West Bank in Gaza. This is 94, 95, after the Oslo Agreement, the miraculous agreement at the time we saw between the Palestinians and Israel. And I wanted for myself, and at the time what happened after the peace agreement is when the first suicide bomb happened, which is very interesting. If you look for justice, but you design a system now that actually reduces the income of the poorer side, you're actually not going to get justice. So what we did in Israel, the majority of Israelis and Palestinians were for peace, vast majority. The settlers, the small group, and it's fairly small, fairly religious, Hamas, Islamic Jihad, were opposed to the agreement as well. In Birzeit University, the Oxford of the West Bank, most of the students left the PLO when they agreed for an Oslo agreement and moved towards Hamas. I spent 4 days with Hamas. I wanted to find for myself what my arch enemy thinks, not the PLO, which I had a lot of contacts with. I was part of the peace camp. And it was fascinating. It was really fascinating. They wouldn't let me sleep. They never met an Israeli who was not either from the peace camp, that was like really peace camp, that they thought Palestinians were right, we were wrong 100%. Or a soldier or a settler. He was a centrist. And when we were talking, I said to them, look guys, you've got to listen to more news, and that's about diversity again. You cannot just listen to your own tradition. But I said to Hamas, if you guys are listening to the mosque, to the sermons on Friday, and that's your source of information, and you think they formed themselves the opinion, they were students, that we are like the Crusaders, and we will leave back to Europe. I said, you don't understand, we walked this whole country. I said, let me recommend to you a chapter from our Bible. It's about Samson. We go, everybody goes. So that might make you more inclined toward compromise. If we go, everybody goes. I said, you guys need to start diversifying your sources of information. Again, they were scared I was Secret Service. I was scared they're going to kill me as Hamas, and I'm an Israeli. So let me tell you one not funny story, one a bit of a funny story. I always got to inject some humor into those situations. So at night we're driving to the village, and suddenly a racing in front of us, opposite us. So it's me and 3 Hamas members in a car at night. There's no lights. The only light in the Palestinian villages was the generator. There's no water most of the day because we're using it for farming, so it's available to them either early morning or late at night. And facing us is a black Mercedes flying by. And you know what I'm thinking? I'm so vain. I'm thinking the headline tomorrow in the Israeli papers, the headline is Israeli trader killed with 3 Hamas members by the Israeli Secret Service. Because the Israeli Secret Service love to confiscate black Mercedeses who blend in the Palestinian population and use it for assassination things. So I thought, here I am, assassinated, I'm going to be an embarrassment to everyone who knows me. I was just killed with 3 Palestinians, Hamas members. Here's the funny story. The last night with Hamas, I'm telling them I'm going back, and then I'm going to be going back to the United States in 2 weeks. That was kind of a break in my trip. I said, Teny, and I can do a Palestinian accent, right? Teny, but I won't do it tonight. You're going back to the United States. Do you mind sending us some electrical switches? And I'm like, life is better than fiction.
Yeah, right.
Right? Here they're asking me for electrical switches, which is what we need for suicide bombs. Right? As I'm going back. You know, so this whole animosity and that, life is more interesting. I ended up going to Harvard, a conference after Rabin was assassinated. Harvard sent me immediately to Tel Aviv. A few months later, so I was with the peace camp, they're saying it doesn't matter who wins the election. Peace process is underailable. So you're looking at a very hardcore liberal. That's why I went to spend time with Hamas. And I told them, If we're going to succeed, those of us who love freedom and consider ourselves liberal, we got to be as hardcore as the extremists on the other side. And that's always been my belief, and that's why I work with gangs on the street. That's why if I'm asking cops to show up at 2 in the morning in a freezing weather for homicide, and I want to be a community partner and do my work, I better get out of bed myself and do the same. Otherwise, it's not worth the thing. The same with us who care about living together and making peace. If we cannot deliver, it's like a football game. It's the other team's chance now to get you into your end zone. And in Israel, we had 6 exchanges of conservative and liberal governments. We haven't delivered. That's why people vote conservative. That's nothing personal. It's easy to hate the other side. If we don't deliver, we shouldn't be surprised when the other side gets to win the election. I feel it, by the way, the same by the United States. So, with the peace process being derailed, we ended up Harvard asked me to bring the full foreign ministers after Rabin's assassination to London. Scotland Yard tells me, mockingly, you Israelis and Americans are so overworked with security. We like low-key. I said, you're wrong, you're going to regret it, but okay, I heard you. I'm setting up the whole conference, right? I have about 4 days. Sure enough, they come back begging that they're going to put snipers on them, because we really got 4 foreign ministers, right? And I don't care about London or not, it's the Middle East. We just had a prime minister killed. The Israeli ambassador says the same thing. We're not going to protect this guy. Says, look, he's got the Israeli nuclear secrets, you better. Eventually crawls, can I see you for like 2 minutes? I'll pick him up personally from the airport. I went to study art and philosophy. How am I like suddenly making those decisions on security in the Middle East? And proven right. It shows you that you can study one thing as long as you're thinking out of the box and thinking smart. You're sometimes more valuable than professional. The last funny thing is the Palestinian ambassador says, Teny, you got to get me security to the Palestinian foreign minister. I said, no way. He gets shot in London and they find out it's the Israeli who got him security. I'm dead. So go to the Egyptian, because they were like the fourth group. Say, Teny, we don't trust the Egyptian. So again, life is just so much better than fiction. So I got him security, but not through under my name. Right? We went through somewhere else, but it was the Israeli who got the Palestinian ambassador security in London. So I can go on and on. I'm probably running over time, right?
Just about right.
Just about right. I ended up at Harvard Divinity School for 2 reasons. I studied philosophy undergrad, political philosophy and ethics. And I felt, A, I had baggage against religion. In Israel, we fight the religious establishment tooth and nail. They're getting funding for schools that are empty fields. There's real difficult feeling, to the point that they call us anti-Semites. I mean, it's not pretty. And yet, at the same time, there's so much beauty in our tradition. And I grew up in a mixed tradition. I ended up in America working with the Pentecostal church. Right? Studying political philosophy, I felt that I was missing half my brain. The faith traditions have actually, particularly Catholicism, have run an empire for the last 2,000 years. Western civilization. There's so much wisdom that when you look at literature, when you're good at political philosophy, if you try and isolate, which is what now we do in universities, from the religion tradition, you're actually not fully learning the thinking and the context of how society were forming themselves, where it was the Greeks, the Romans, the Florentines. On the history of religion and philosophy and running society is completely intertwined. Right? The second thing is saying because religion is a human invention, but I won't go there now. Right? But these are human traditions. So I felt always when I was debating religious people, I was with one hand behind my back tied, because I really didn't know to speak of, apart from the Jewish tradition, which we studied from the 4th grade till the 12th grade. We studied the Hebrew Bible in its original language, which I cannot read now, but I was able in 4th grade. So I ended up at Harvard Divinity School doing mainly Catholicism, the just war theory with Father Hare, MacArthur, a brilliant thinker, the social tradition of Father Maury and Nebo and others, some Buddhism. And I studied Buddhism. I'm a bit of a conservative. So I wanted to make sure that I'm correct, that the Eastern traditions are not more compassionate than us in the West. People like to beat on the West. I got it kind of confirmed. I actually now kind of reversed my thoughts since I'm spending now time with quite a lot of the Buddhists doing meditation, going to Auschwitz and other things. But at the time, I kind of confirmed my suspicion. So that's not the end of religion in my secular life. I ended up being recruited by a Catholic church on the south side of Providence to start the Institute. Father Ray Ma, Sister Ann Keefe, who are legends in Providence, just legends. Sister Ann started about 20 of the most successful nonprofits. And I really said to them, I'm interviewing you for the job, too. And that's something that some of you are looking sort of for career advice and that. So, yes, I wanted a job, but I was like also, I did 10 years in Boston in one place. I do not, by the way, if people send resumes to the Institute and every 2 years they move a job, it goes immediately in the trash. To me, loyalty and coming to build as a team something long is extremely important. I'm not for the innovation awards and every 2 years you jump on a new idea. You can't build a sustained society like that. I'm looking for people who are willing to really work hard and build something meaningful. And nothing meaningful happens in 2 years, I don't think. So I was recruited by this priest and a nun who are now like my surrogate parents. I don't have my parents anymore. And that's another thing. Am I Catholic? No, I'm partially Catholic. I was actually baptized in a Palestinian church. And so I didn't tell that story. My middle name is Christian, actually Christian. I said to my parents, I know you were afraid of another Hitler, and you went to baptize me, but did you have to give me the name Christian on my baptism card? Right? So, I love midnight mass. I do street work. I'm always afraid someone gets shot, Christmas night, etc. But I stopped always at St. Michael's around midnight. I love the beauty of it. I love the spirit. I love Father Ray the way he runs mass. There's beauty to that. And that's the thing I found in so many faith traditions. Otherwise, there's this, not the ceremony, but there's the part of those traditions as well. There's the intellectual part of religion, but then there's the tradition part of the traditions. You know, for example, gefilte fish is an acquired taste, right? This is something you're born with. I'm not going to force it on any one of you who didn't grow up in that tradition. It is not something that's yummy, right? But those of us who grew up on that, it's addictive, right? So matzah ball, you can definitely easily convert to people who are not Jewish, right? And actually, the Christians in my life make a better chicken soup, matzah ball soup than the Jews. But that's good. So I'll stop here. You wanted some questions? Do we have time?
Absolutely. We're great. Teny goes. Thank you. I'm a closet historian, and you, in your life, you gave us the history of the 20th century.
I am old.
You are, no, not you personally, but your family's life, the struggles, the issues of ethnic and religious identity, and the conflict. This is a gift that we can never thank you properly for. Are there any questions?
Challenges, disagreements?
I was just going to ask you, because you were finishing talking about this. We have many students, and our new president, we have many students here involved in service, and our new president, Donald Barish, wishes he could be here, but he has another gig across the street. He really wants to encourage service learning. And we have this amazing institute here. How do students who are interested in doing nonviolence work enter into that?
So again, if you think, so wow, look what Teny is doing. So, we're working with Brazil, we were with Belfast twice, Guatemala, all around the United States. Well, I'm 46 now. I'm now at the top of my game, as the same as some of the professors here. But it all starts with small steps. The Chinese were right. Every journey starts with small steps. I was involved in a little dialogues group at Harvard Law School around the Middle East. At the museum school, there was a small project. I started with taking a camera to an area I didn't know on the bus, the 23 bus to Ashmont in Dorchester, listening and reading. So you don't need to don't have the end plan when you get involved. And it's okay to shop around and be interested in different things, but just get exposed to people who are doing work. Today I brought two people who didn't know each other, who are amazing leaders in Rhode Island, in Providence. Bert Krenker runs AS220, a great art organization. And Pastor Jeff Williams, who runs one of the most important, I wouldn't actually say an African-American church, because it's a very diverse church in Olneyville. But there are two, Jeff Williams went to Brown, Kennedy School, very innovative. His church buys lots of properties in Olneyville, a very poor neighborhood. AS220, Bert Krenker, one of the most innovative art leaders in the country. This is not an overstatement. They didn't know each other. And we're bringing them at the Institute to try and think of something around employment for gang-involved youth together. So one of the things that I live by in a candy store, the powers of the Institute has, we're starving for resources, to kind of bring people together and make things happen. Be part of those organizations. There's so many who are doing things. Learn from good leaders, mediocre leaders, organizations. See what it is to do. A lot more people and growth in the world is going to be around nonprofits and NGOs. This is no longer a sidekick or for people who cannot be bankers. No offense, right? This is now actually a much growing. A lot of the world's problems are going to be solved by people working in collaboration between nonprofits, universities, police departments. The breaking of cylinders is much more common today. Today, officers go and spend time in nonprofits. They go and spend time in different degrees. We have much more people from government go to stints in universities, go to nonprofits, vice versa. So give yourself that flexible background, but don't be overwhelmed. Just take some choices, go and taste. It's about tasting. Like, if you like to walk into a restaurant with food that was not from your tradition, same with experiencing nonprofit. It doesn't need to be, I really stumbled into that. I did not have a plan to do what I do today at all. But you can see a person when they find their purpose. Right? And I found my purpose. I'll do this for the rest of my life. It's what's going to. I'm not a leader of a nonprofit. If I leave the Institute, I'm not going to run the food bank or, I deal with violence. I deal with gang members and their successes when instead of being dead, or I remember them in the hospital being dead, being brought back to life, like a young man Sasson we have from C-Block, was shot, killed, bled to death. He works now at Trinity Theatre. He's taking classes at CC Orion Theatre. These are the stories we live from. They're few and far between. Some just saving lives. So you find your purpose. But we also in Israel, the pressure, get married and find a career. In America, I think it's a bit less. I'm sure you got the pressure too. Give yourself time to find your purpose. I think that's really, really important because we do live once. If you're a Buddhist and you believe in reincarnation, good for you. I'm kind of like, this is my gig, this is my time. I'm looking at the time winding down, and I better I asked myself at 17 for the first time, if a truck, I literally saw a truck in my mind, hits me today, did I live a good life? And I like to ask myself that every 6 months.
I have a question about mediation as a tool and as a curriculum.
Yeah.
I just finished about 40 odd years in the Boston Public Schools, so I know well some of the areas you're talking about. In 1 year, working at a middle school near Roxbury called the Dearborn Middle School, one of the Orchard Park projects, we lost 9 kids to guns and knives, and only 250 kids in the school.
Yeah.
So we would do mediations during the course of the day. We really had to get those mediations done before the end of the day, so violence would erupt at the end of the school day. And it was always hard to get kids out of class because teachers wanted them in class for academic work. So the issue was to go back to those teachers and say, there is a curriculum here in these mediations that these kids learn about dealing with hot button issues, with rules and boundaries and adult sort of intervention in a way that's totally valuable to their academic learning and to their survival in life for many years.
Right.
It was hard to
Great
make
question.
that case.
So I'm a taxpayer, as you are, and we spend $120,000 on public school education. Each one of us, we had 12 years of public education, costs us per kid $120,000. About that, more actually. What am I saying? It's like I think 14,000 in Providence, so 12 years. Do the math. This is my expectation. The Greeks like 3, right? We get 2 at the moment. We get them really badly because of this, right? Where the expectation is you can do math, you can add and subtract, because there's a lot of bills and understand. You can read. And the third one, that you will be a civilized human being. We don't put anything in there. No child left behind, right? We basically we eliminated the third stool. Now, we teach today literature for literary devices. What nonsense is that? What is great literature? What is Hemingway, Dostoevsky? My mother, by the way, when she was bitter before she died that America was bombing Serbia, said, they think we are barbarians, but we read Voltaire in 9th grade. They don't read it until they get a PhD. So that was my mom's little last fast into America. But the point is, you study literature. What is great literature? Like the Bible. Great. One of my favorites, The Old Man and the Sea. It's a real moral story about what happened to DNS and Metropolis. That's The Old Man and the Sea. A great fish gets eaten bit by bit. Great literature is a moral debate that helps us make decisions in life and enriches us. That's what great literature is. You don't teach it for voice devices. I mean, I can understand we do part of that. This is not a car mechanic. It's not a garage. Life is not just a garage. And that's what we don't do. Education used to be 12 years an opportunity that I expect as a taxpayer that I will give you some roundness to face the world. Because in India and other places, in 4th grade, you got to go and work on the farm. In fact, in America, you used to have to do it. So now I keep you at a taxpayer's expense for 12 years, and I cannot get a civilized human being. Because we think that I need to prepare you for a test. Actually, we eliminate your theater and music and running in the playground, which is so important to actually learning how to be civilized. Actually, you will like it a lot. There's no way Teny would have been kept in an American school system. If I didn't play like 2 hours of soccer a day and run around and smack people around and that, there was no way I would have stayed at school. And I ended up at Harvard, right? So we are doing things that look like they're productive, increasing the dosage of math and literacy, but we're cutting the other thing that really makes a person love learning. And therefore, with the mediation part, there's no child left behind, but it's okay if they die. And that's what we got in Boston. Boston, in a few weeks, Paul Grogan is going to come, the president of the Boston Foundation, is going to come and speak. Paul Grogan and I had a conversation. We started a friendship through a fight. He came to speak to introduce, he was the head of National List. And I asked him after Bratton, the most legendary chief of police in the world, probably I think it's fair to say, was the keynote. And after that I said, Paul, how do we make street workers, what I do, replicable nationally? He said to me, he shot back at me, there's no proof street work works. I said, no, but there's proof that what you do doesn't. I said, you have invested $250 million in where the mosque is, Grove Hall. You know Grove Hall well, in Roxbury. And violence has doubled. I said, you know why, Paul? You didn't invest in human capital. I win, you lose, which is what South said, the drug dealer. I win, you lose. What the Institute does, so since then, next day they sent someone from Lisk in New York to meet me. They were so alarmed. Because I said, I'm willing to write an editorial with Paul Grogan going head-to-head in the New York Times. Where is the better investment, in properties or in people? I said, let's do a head-to-head editorial in the New York Times. So they sent someone from New York the next day. We became very good friends because we started to see each other's perspective. We did experiments in Providence where we saw the development of streets, improvement with human capital, police, and other investment really makes a difference. And he became a convert. In fact, I'm having then dinners with him in Boston thinking, you know what, Teny? What if the Boston Foundation invested in doing a street worker program in Boston? Now Paul Grogan is my hero. I wanted to convince Neil Steinberg in the Rhode Island Foundation to do the same here in Rhode Island. Paul Grogan and I invested $25 million in a second street worker program. There's a city one. To invest exactly in that. You know, if you don't invest in people who are in conflict, A, to have an income, and B, to really think through the process. They're competence. We taught in Belfast Catholic and Protestants. These are competence. You want to shift them to peacemakers, that takes a process. And it doesn't happen overnight. I had to go through detox of 10 years of thinking about the Palestinians differently. It doesn't happen overnight. And I'm thankful for you investing in mediating with kids. And OP, 9 of them dying, is an absurdity in this wealthy country.
I hate to end this because you could sit and listen to so much more about the Institute.
Don't see the tortured faces.
They're sitting here. Please pick up some literature about Teny and the Institute. For those who need to sign the clipboard, we have that for you. Most of all, please come and join us for a reception for Teny and for the gift of his talk. I want to also just say that Teny is very approachable, so don't stand back, with your soda and think, I'm not going to, he doesn't want to talk to me. He does. He really wants to talk to you. So feel free to go introduce yourself. Tell him about yourself he wants to know. I thank you, Teny.
Thank you.